Thank you, Mr. Joffrey. Welcome to Winning Well, How to Get Results Without Losing Your Soul or Your Mind in the Process. And when I share this title or people see the book, there are two questions that are usually asked right away, and you might be experiencing one of these questions. The first question is, get results without losing your soul. Can I actually be a manager in today's world and get results without losing my soul? In other words, can I be a good human being and do that? Is that even possible? And my co-author Karen and I would unequivocally say yes, it is absolutely possible. And today we're going to show and give you some of those tools and tips that lay a foundation and will help you to do that. The other question that we're frequently asked when they say, well, okay, see the title of the book here, or the webinar, is, what do you mean by losing your soul? That's an interesting phrase for a business book. And I've worked with thousands and thousands of managers all over different industries, across countries, and so forth. And we see some consistent patterns happen with those managers. In today's world, we have increasing global competition. We're not just working to achieve results maybe with the company across the street. We're working and competing across the world. And you've got pressure from your board or your supervisor. And you've got the needs of your team. And in the tension in between those two things, it frequently happens that what we say is that managers lose their soul. Well, what does that look like? Well, there are two leadership addictions that creep in. One is where a manager gets frustrated, they're stressed, they've got to achieve these results, and so they succumb to shortcuts. They'll use fear, power, and control. That's one of the shortcuts, one of the addictions. And what happens is that addiction, doing that, actually isolates you from the very people you need to be successful, right? The other thing that we'll see frequently is that managers will start doing everything themselves. They just get frustrated, I've got to do this myself. And either way, whether you're pushing people or whether you're just trying to do everything yourself, either one of those ends up in a place where you're isolated from the people you need to be successful. You can end up bitter and burned out because you're working harder and harder and harder to achieve the same exact thing, or maybe you're even feeling like you're sliding backwards. Now, statistically, we know from some of the research that's been done, and it depends on the study that you look at. These numbers are from the Gallup organization and some of their surveys and studies around employee engagement. And you likely, if you follow these subjects at all, you've likely seen these numbers, is that 70% of the workforce are not engaged in their work. That means if you have 10 employees, statistically, if they're global employees, only 3 or 4 of them perhaps are invested in what they're doing. They're bringing energy and their heart to the work. The other 6 or 7 are not. And I've never met a manager, I've never worked with a manager who said, you know, if I could just get the very minimum amount of effort from my people, we would be on fire, we would be doing so well. No, as a manager, as a leader, as a business owner, you want the most from your folks. You want that energy and their heart engaged in their work. Well, the even more interesting statistic to me is this one. This is a little more recent from Gallup organization, is that 66% of managers are not engaged in their work. Those same managers, this 66%, indicate they're symbolic of managers who have lost their soul. They're frustrated, they're bitter, they're burnt out, they don't know what to do. They're trying harder and harder just to stay in place, and they're slowly drifting away. And we'll take a look at some of the reasons this happens. But before I do that, I looked at some of the data worldwide, and here's some good news and some congratulations to you if you're listening to this webinar. You likely are above average in these statistics. Now, above average still isn't good enough, so let's say that instead of 7 people being disengaged, only 5 are disengaged, depending on which study you look at. Some of the better ones I found said in Saudi Arabia it's as good as maybe 4 or 5 people are not. So you are to be congratulated because you're beating the worldwide statistics. We still want to do better than that. And the key to doing better than that, and not losing our soul, not ending up frustrated, bitter, burnt out, is what we call, to start with, the winning well mindset. So how do we achieve results without losing our soul in the process? Well, it starts with our approach. What's going on inside us? Before we look at any of the things we do, And I want to share with you, to illustrate this, I want to share with you a picture of my favorite tree. This tree is in the National Bonsai Museum in Washington, D.C., in the United States. This tree is very moving to me. It's a work of art. I am moved to tears when I'm with this tree in person. And I want to tell you why. This tree is nearly 400 years old. And if you know anything about bonsai trees, they require near daily care. So for 400 years, generation after generation of Japanese family cared for this tree. Horticulturalists, gardeners, family members. 400 years. Then this tree survived the atomic bombing at Hiroshima. It survived that atrocious war, and it was gifted in the 1970s along with a bigger collection as peace between countries. It is a beautiful testament to the human spirit, to artistry, to discipline, to consistency, to perseverance, to peace, just the human experience. I just love this tree. The first time that I ever saw this tree, I asked the caretaker. He had little tweezers and he was picking things out of the soil, and I asked him, "Sir, how do you make these trees? How do you make it so beautiful?" And the answer that he gave me was something that would change my approach to leadership and to management forever, for the rest of my life. Before I tell you what he said, I want to show you one more tree in this national collection. This is an azalea. And azaleas, when they bloom, they are covered in blossoms. This one, obviously, right now, just as leaves. Well, if I were to ask you, how would you motivate this plant to bloom? You might tell me, well, Mr. David, I would give it sunlight, I would give it water, or I would make sure it had proper soil, right? You wouldn't take it to see a tree speaker, a motivational speaker about trees, right? It's silly. You don't actually motivate the tree. What you do is you give it the things that it needs to grow and be successful. Sunlight, water, soil, air, and so on. Here is this same tree when it blooms. I just think that's beautiful. All of the answers that you might have given me, sunlight, water, air, and so on, are what we call cultivation. And this is what the gentleman told me when I asked him this question, how do you make it so beautiful? What he told me was, son, you don't make a tree do anything. Our job isn't to make the tree beautiful. It's already beautiful. It has its own strengths. Our job is to cultivate an environment that allows that tree to grow, to bloom, and to become the best, most beautiful version of itself. Yes, we might prune it to help reveal that, but that's our job, to cultivate. And it occurred to me that people are very much like trees. You cannot make another human being do anything. A person's motivation always comes from inside of them. They make their decisions, they choose what they'll do. Our job as leaders and as managers is to create an environment that allows that person's strengths, talents, energy to be released towards your team's goals, your company's mission. So the way we say this is, don't motivate, cultivate. When it comes to people, you can't force anyone to do anything, just as you cannot force a tree to grow. But when you provide the right environment, when you cultivate the right environment, people naturally then, they can release their strengths, their talents, and their energy towards your mission. So don't motivate, cultivate is the first piece of a winning well mindset. So how do we go about cultivating? Well, here is the real foundation. If you go to a dentist, likely the dentist tells you to do two things to take care of your teeth. They want you to brush your teeth, and they want you to floss your teeth. Those are the two fundamentals of taking care of teeth. Well, in leadership, there are similar fundamentals. I call the brush and floss of leadership, and I illustrate this through a little graph here. On the bottom of this graph, on the vertical axis, we start with confidence. This is an internal value. Internally, it takes confidence to lead. It takes confidence to say, together, we can have a better tomorrow than we do today. Also, we have to be focused on results. So internally we have confidence, externally we focus on results. What are we here to achieve? We're going to have accountability for those objectives and so on. Then on the horizontal axis, over on the right, you'll see humility. While we lead from a place of confidence, we also lead from a place of humility, which is the awareness that I have strengths and so does every other member of my team. That I have ideas and I know things, but other people on the team also know things. And if I will invite disagreement in a healthy way, we can arrive at a better decision than if we always do just what I think is best. We pair that internal value of humility with an external focus on relationships, growing healthy, productive, professional relationships. And so we see some interactions between these things. So if you follow me up to the left-hand top quadrant, where we have a very strong focus on results, we have a lot of confidence, but no humility and no good relationships, that can feel like working in a sweatshop. And if you've ever worked in an environment like this manager doesn't care about the people, they just use them. When the people leave, they say, fine, I'll replace them with more. We call this manager type a user manager. They're just using people to get results. And the reality is, for this manager, this is a very frustrating experience. I've coached many of these managers, very high stress, lots of health problems, and they feel very alone in the world. It's not a pleasant place to be. Now, if you follow me down to the lower right-hand quadrant, we have people who have a lot of humility and maybe focus on building good relationships, but they're not accomplishing any results. Being on this sort of a team, if you've ever worked for a manager like this, it can feel like a continual party. For a week or a month or maybe longer, it can feel very good and fun, but ultimately you're not achieving results, and that becomes very stressful. We call this type of manager a pleaser. This is a manager who wants to make everybody happy, but they're not really getting things done. And ultimately, this manager is very stressed as well. When I coach and work with these managers, they get angry because they've been trying to make everybody happy, but work and achieving results isn't about making everybody happy. It's about getting the right things done. Then if you follow over to the left-hand quadrant, where we have neither humility nor confidence, neither relationships nor results, that can feel like a pinball, like you're in or a soccer ball being kicked around a field. If you've ever worked in that environment, you're working for somebody we call a gamer. They are playing games just trying to increase their own status, trying to survive, and they're not trying to do anything for the people or for the results that the team is trying to accomplish. Now, the good news is that when you combine these, when you have confidence in results and humility in relationships, that's where you have a winning well team, a team that sustains results over time. You can accomplish those results again and again. It's not just once. You do it over and over again. We have a candy here in the United States. It's called the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, and I love this candy. It takes two things that are enjoyable. One is peanut butter, the other is chocolate, and it combines them. So I say that there is power in the and. It's not about relationships or results. It's about relationships and results. So how do you use this? The idea is that every time you walk into a situation with another person on your team, you might be doing a disciplinary meeting. You might be doing an evaluation meeting. Maybe you're having a strategic planning conversation. Maybe it's a team meeting. Maybe you're problem solving with a couple of different people. Every time you have an interaction with another person in your team, your department, or your company, you ask two questions. I call this the winning well leadership formula. It's L equals R squared. And the questions are, how can we achieve meaningful results, and how can we build healthy professional relationships? We'll go into every interaction asking those two questions. It's not, well, how do we get results today? Or how do we build relationships today? It's, how do we get results and how do we build relationships? I can promise that if you go into every situation asking those two questions, you'll start to find the ways to move forward. You'll start getting those answers. Now, good news is I'm going to take some more time here this morning in our remaining time, and we're going to talk about some of the things. We won't go through everything. We've got hundreds and hundreds of tips available in Winning Well, but we're going to share a few. How do you focus on results, and how do you use relationships to drive those results? So let's start with our focus on results. First, I want to share with you something that happened during the Apollo 13 space mission to the moon. This was in 1969. The United States had astronauts traveling to the moon, and 200,000 miles from home, their spaceship had an explosion. I mean, if you're familiar with the story, if you've heard anything about it, there was an oxygen tank that blew up, and it didn't destroy the spaceship, but it certainly damaged it, and they didn't know what was going to happen. So they are 200,000 miles from home, and they said these words that were very famous. The lead astronaut said, "Houston, we have a problem. I don't know about you, but if I'm on a spaceship 200,000 miles from Earth and there's an explosion, I think I might say something a little more stressful than, 'Houston, we have a problem.'" But these were highly trained astronauts, and that's actually important to the story. So what happened was they had left Earth. They were trying to decide, can we turn around where that X is? Do we turn around and come home, or do they go around the moon? And they didn't have enough fuel to turn around and come home. They couldn't do that. So they had to go around the moon. And when you go around the moon where the dotted line is, you lose radio contact with Earth. The moon blocks the signals. So they're on the other side of the moon as they go around the moon, and they have no contact with Earth. They're now 300,000 miles from home. 3 astronauts on a damaged spaceship in the middle of space. When they come out from around the side of the moon, they have to push a button that will do a fuel burn, and essentially they don't know when they push that button, is the spaceship going to explode, or are they going to be able to keep going? So I want you to think about if you were on that spaceship, if you were on the other side of the moon, 300,000 miles from Earth, and you know when in just a few minutes you have to push that button, and you don't know what's going to happen. These were highly trained astronauts. One of them, the commander of the mission, his name was Jim Lovell. He had been to the moon before. The other 2, they were new. They were very well trained, and they'd been astronauts, but they had not been to the moon. This was their first trip to the moon. So I don't know, when I imagine myself in that scenario, I think I would be very focused. I would be paying close attention, making sure everything was ready and was working properly. But we find that that's not what happened. And in fact, the truth is that the 2 new guys, the 2 new people, they were taking pictures of the moon. Their names were Swigert and Hayes, and this is a movie depiction of them. They were looking out the window. Instead of preparing for the fuel burn and making sure everything would work, they're looking out the window taking pictures. And I love this moment because as leaders, it's easy for us to get frustrated at our people. If you've ever had your people get distracted, they lose focus, they forget the mission, they forget what they're supposed to be doing. I often remember these astronauts. Your people don't get distracted because they're bad people. They get distracted because they're people. And if these astronauts, with their lives on the line in the middle of space, they could get distracted, well, it's going to happen to me, it's going to happen to you, and it's going to happen to your team members. The other part of the story that I very much love is the leadership that the commander showed. He sees them looking out the window, and he says this. He says, "Gentlemen, what are your intentions?" And he goes on to say, "I want to go home. And besides, if we don't get home, you're not going to be able to develop those pictures. So let's stow the camera. Let's prepare for this fuel burn. Let's get back to business." With their lives on the line, I cannot think of a higher stress situation. With their lives on the line, the commander, Captain Jim Lovell, gets everybody focused with a very simple question. "Gentlemen, what are your intentions?" And then he clarifies results. He says, "I want to go home." All of results start with clarity. And what do I mean by this? Well, I do a lot of consulting, as I said, worked with thousands and thousands of leaders, different industries. 9 out of 10 times, the problems that a manager is having come back to the fact that they have not been as clear about their results as they think they were. It's clear to you, it's clear in your mind, but guess what? You always make sense to you. It's much more challenging to make sure that those results are clear to everyone else. So the way I encourage you to address this is, what does success look like? And here is, as a consultant, as a leadership expert, here's what I want to be able to do. If I visit your team or your company or your department, I want to be able to ask everybody in that organization, what does success look like? And I'm going to ask 3 ways. What does success look like for your company? Can they answer that? What does success look like for your team? And then, what does success look like for your specific role? And what I'm looking for is, if I ask everybody in the company, what does success look like, does everybody in the company answer that question the same way? Well, success looks like we provide our customers this level of service, we maintain our sales at this level, or whatever it is you're doing. Maybe if you're in a government setting, it might be providing a certain level of service for your citizens or for public safety. If you're a hospital, what does success look like? It might be certain patient outcomes, low infection rates. There's many different ways that success can look, but the important piece is that for your organization, everybody knows what does success look like for the organization. Then you go to the team. Does everybody on the team answer that question the same way? What does success look like? Does every individual know what success looks like for themselves? The idea here is that clear expectations energize. When people are clear about the expectations, that's a cultivating characteristic. You can then go after and pursue those expectations. 90% of the time when when you're struggling, the first place to look is, are your expectations clear? If you ask your folks, okay, you can find out. Go ask them. I'm curious, what does success look like for you, for our team? What do you think it is? And if everybody doesn't answer the same way, then you've got a conversation that you need to have. Now, the next piece of results is something that I learned from my daughter, but it took me about 25 years to learn this. It was a challenging situation. See, when I was 16, I decided I wanted to be a vegetarian. My dad was a vegetarian. He had all these articles on how to do it well and do your nutrition well. So I read all of these articles, and I was a strict practicing vegetarian for 3 whole days. I'm not proud. It was a 3-day experiment, and it didn't last. But my daughter, when she was 16, she decided she wanted to be a vegetarian. Now, whether you think being vegetarian is good or not, it doesn't matter. What's important is that she succeeded in her effort. She started when she was 16. That was 7 years ago. She's 23 now. And she has maintained her practice of being a vegetarian. So I want to ask you a question. We had the same what? Not eat meat, just eat vegetables. My practice lasted 3 days. Hers has lasted 7 years. And so what was the difference? Well, let's start with me. If you were to imagine, why do you think I wanted to be a vegetarian? Most people will say, well, it was to be like your father. And that makes sense. Maybe I wanted to be like my father, but in reality, that wasn't the answer. The real answer was that I somehow thought that if I just was a vegetarian and just ate vegetables, that would help me attract the attention of a woman. That made no sense. It's embarrassing to say that today, but I was 16, and teenagers are not the smartest creatures on the planet, are they? Well, my daughter, in contrast, she had 3 reasons why she wanted to be a vegetarian. 3 of her reasons why were that she thought it would be a healthier way for her to live, that she would live more sustainably on the planet. It was ecologically friendly for her in her mind. And she thought that she didn't want to eat anything with a face. Ethically, for her own ethics, that was important to her. So we had the same what, had the same exact what, don't eat meat. But our whys were different. And those whys created very different behaviors. For me, my whys were shallow, they were irrational, they didn't make any sense. For her, they were very meaningful, and they went. Now, those whys might not mean anything to you, but they did drive her behavior. Now, let's take this back to leadership and management. The reason I share this is because the expectations that you have for your team and for your company and for your employees, those are whats. We're going to interact with our customers in this way. We're going to fill out these reports this way. We're going to record this data this way. We're going to make these phone calls. We're going to do whatever it is. You have these expectations, these whats. What you want to do as a leader is to connect every what to a meaningful and compelling reason why. Clear expectations always include the why. So when the commander of the space mission said, hey, I want to go home, he gave them a why that mattered to them. He said, and besides, if we don't get home, you're not going to be able to develop those pictures. So he connected the mission back to a bigger why, getting home, but then a reason why that why was even relevant to them. So that's a higher level way of connecting the what to the why. But why are you asking people to do what you do? What meaning does it have? Now here's the good news. We know that when you connect what you're asking people to do with why you're asking them to do it, it doubles productivity. That's what the research tells us in the different companies, different situations, is that when you can make that connection for people, it can double their productivity over when they don't know why they're doing something. So those are a couple of key elements of being focused on results. We want to have clear expectations. What does success look like? Remember that people get distracted, so we want to stay consistent with that. And then connect every what to a meaningful and compelling reason why. So what does success look like, and why are we doing those things? And the next place we're going to go is to relationships, because we know that relationships drive results. And again, we share dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of different ways to build those healthy, productive relationships. I want to share just a couple with you this morning or this afternoon, wherever you might be, that are going to be helpful for you. These are the redwoods in California. These are the Pacific Coast redwoods. These are the tallest living things on the planet Earth. This particular one you're looking at here grows to a height of 363 feet, which is over 120 meters, right? Tremendous, tremendous plants. They're the tallest things on the planet. Well, when I visited them, I was struck by something. This is a picture of me in my outdoor gear, outdoor clothing, and I'm standing next to one of these trees that has fallen over. And I expected that the tallest thing, something 300 feet tall, was going to have roots that went down deep into the earth that would hold it and anchor it to the earth. But what I discovered when I stood here and looked at this fallen tree is that there was no deep root. So I went back that night to my hotel after I visited the trees, and I did some research, and I discovered something very interesting. The tallest living things on Earth, they don't have deep roots. Their roots only go down about 1.5, 2 meters into the earth. And then they stretch out about 30, 35 meters in every direction. And those roots actually intertwine and fuse with the roots of the neighboring trees. This was fascinating to me because the tallest living things on Earth don't get tall alone. They do it together. In your business, the results you want to achieve, I know you want to become tall. I know that you want to reach a level of success for your team, for your company, for your department, whatever your position might be. The reality is you don't get tall alone. You do it together. These trees fuse their roots together, and that helps them live for thousands of years and withstand floods and winds and storms and everything else that would knock them over. So relationships. When it comes to your employees, every employee is asking themselves a question, and they're asking you, even though they never say it, it's in their mind. Why should I work with you? Why should I trust you? Why should I give you my energy? Your customers are asking the same question. Why should I give you my business? Why should I? Why should I bother? Right? Well, when it comes to relationships, one of the first things to remember is that people are different. If you're going to build healthy, productive workplace relationships, it's very, very important to keep in mind that people are different. What do we mean by this? What we mean is that people have different strengths. People have different strengths. So my co-author of my book, she is a gregarious, outgoing person. She is good at a party. She's energized by being with people. I, on the other hand, I am more quiet and reflective. I like people and I enjoy time with people, but then I need time to retreat and to rejuvenate and to rebuild my energy. Depending on what is called for, both of those are strengths. I'm very analytical. I can plan things out. She likes to create new ideas and problem solve and come up with cool visions for the future. Well, those are both strengths. Which strength is called for in a particular situation? That's where we want to put our focus. So our publisher, when he needs something done that's analytical, he'll talk to me. When he needs a new idea, he'll talk to my co-author. The idea is that leaders seek strength. You don't focus on frailty. Remembering that people are different. What are the strengths that your team bring to the table? And so what I invite you to do is actually make a list of the people on your team. And can you list next to each person's name one strength that they bring to their job? And then it's not enough to simply list it. Can you encourage them in it? Can you go up to them and have a conversation, a very short conversation, and say, you know, I have noticed your attention to detail and the way that you really take care of all those small things that I might not notice, and I really appreciate that you bring that strength to our team and what it does to help us be productive. Or another person, you might say, you know, I've recognized that when you're talking with a customer, you really make them feel at home. You have a relational ability about you, and you bring people peace, and you make them happy to be here with us, and that really helps us to be effective, and I appreciate that strength. So as a leader, seek out those strengths, reinforce them, appreciate them. Don't focus on people's frailties. And what I mean by this is that none of us have every strength. We don't. If you tried to make me the outgoing, gregarious person and try to make me be energized by people, it wouldn't work. It would be a waste of effort. You're better off using somebody's strengths in places where they have them and building on those strengths rather than trying to focus on frailty. So keep in mind, people are different. We're going to seek strength, not focus on frailty. Then we're going to try to coach that strength. And I know managers know frequently, if you've been around management or leadership for any length of time, you've heard, well, you should coach people, especially as they move from a learner up to somebody who has a certain level of mastery, but they're not yet an expert. When they're in that in-between stage, coaching is very important. And so what I want to do is give you an outline of how you coach somebody. And this is a relational technique where you are investing in their success. You're investing in their strength. But you're not teaching them, you're coaching them, and there's a difference. You'll see how this works. So let's say you have an employee who comes to you with a problem. They say, you know, let's say that my employee comes to me and he says, Mr. David, I am challenged. I don't know I'm trying to solve this problem, but I just can't figure it out. The first question I'm going to ask is, what is your goal? What does success look like? What would you like to achieve? I'll ask them then, what have you tried? What efforts have you made? Then we'll explore what happened when you did those things. So far we're gathering facts. What does success look like? What's your goal? What have you tried? What happened when you tried those things? Then we're going to get them to start reflecting and ask, well, what did you learn from that? Well, maybe I learned I shouldn't approach the client that way. Or maybe I learned that when I bring this to my colleague, the way I brought it made sense to me, but it didn't make any sense to him. So maybe I need to try something different. You'll ask them, well, what else do you need to be successful? And here you might discover that they need some more training, or perhaps there's a tool that they don't know how to use. And don't take this for granted. I was doing some work with a technology company. They make software and hardware that is used all over the world by international applications in agriculture and petroleum and so on. And their engineers were very smart, but we discovered when I asked them, what else do you need, because they were struggling, there was a fundamental piece of software that they didn't know how to use. And it's widespread. It's a very common calendar tool but they didn't know how to use it. So we don't want to assume people know everything they need to know. The next question we're going to ask is, now what might you try? So you've tried this. This is what happened. What did you learn from that? What else might you try? And at this point, you're going to get one of two answers. Either they're going to say, well, David, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. Or they might come up with some ideas. If they come up with some ideas, you're going to explore those ideas with them. You're going to say, well, what do you think would happen if you tried that? And you will get a sense of, do they understand the consequences of their choices? And it will help you know where you can fill in some more information. Now, let's go back. If they say, I don't know, you're going to ask what we call the super bonus question. When someone says, I don't know, but they've basically been trained, one of the best questions you can ask them is, okay, I understand you don't know. What might you do if you did know? What this does is it takes the pressure off. Sometimes they're afraid to tell you what they think because they don't want to let you down. They don't want to take the risk of being wrong or looking foolish in front of you. So when you say, well, what might you do if you did know, you're suggesting we're not necessarily going to do it, and I'm not saying that you do know. I'm just asking perhaps if you did. This is an amazing question, and I've seen it time and time again. Somebody says, well, I don't know. And he said, well, what might you do if you did know? And immediately they say, oh, well, if I did know, maybe we could do this, or maybe we could do that. And when they do that, then you're going to go back to this question and ask them, what do you think will happen if you try those things? Let's explore the consequences and so forth. So what might you do if you did know is a very powerful question, ultimately leading to the final question, which is, what will you do? What will you do? Now here's the takeaway from coaching. When you are coaching your employee in a business setting, you're not giving them all the answers. When you give them answers, that just teaches them to come to you for answers. What you're doing is asking questions that help them to do the thinking so they learn how to come up with answers on their own. When you do that, you are building leaders. You're investing in your people, and you're driving results through relationships. It's a professional relationship where you're helping them become more powerful and be able to make decisions. Then they can start teaching that to other people. That frees you up so you have more time to do the work only you can do. It's that in-between step between somebody being trained and somebody being fully proficient and having all the answers. In between is coaching. Now, I went through those quickly. Here is a flow chart, and it's in you can download it at winningwellbook.com. You also have it in your handouts from Mile. The slide is in there, and you can get that way as well. Or if you need, I'm happy to send it to you as well. You just tell me. Coaching conversations, and you can print this out or do your own version of it and just keep it in front of you as you're talking with an employee to help them walk through and find the answers they need. I want to close with one more story. This woman is named Jennifer. And when we're talking about relationships, she had a very interesting situation. She was a manager of a women's clothing store. It's a chain of clothing stores, so they're all over. And her district manager had decided that Jennifer was a very good manager and was going to be an executive manager for the entire store across the country at a point in the future. But then Jennifer quit. Her district manager found Jennifer at a coffee shop and said, Jennifer, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? She said yes. And the district manager said, Jennifer, we thought you were a high potential employee. In fact, we had targeted that you were going to be one of our executive managers in the future. And then all of a sudden, you quit and you left us. And I'm wondering why. Why did you leave? And Jennifer's eyes grew very big. And she said, well, I'm a district manager. I wish you would have told me that when I was there, when I was working for you. And Jennifer said, let me tell you what life looked like for me. Every week I got a report from you and from the headquarters about all of the things that I needed to improve, the things that I wasn't doing well, and performance objectives that I needed to meet. Quite honestly, I thought that you all were trying to get rid of me. I thought I wasn't doing a good enough job and that you wanted me to resign because I never heard I was doing anything well. I am often asked by managers and leaders. And it doesn't matter the industry, and sometimes it doesn't matter the country either. But I frequently hear people ask, David, why should I encourage my people? Why should I take the time to build these relationships? Well, my answer is, how important to you are your high-performing employees? Jennifer was a high-performing employee, but she left because she wasn't being encouraged and she didn't know she was doing a good job. And that's sad. That company lost a lot of potential. Now they had to train a brand new manager where they could have, with a little bit of praise and a little bit of encouragement, help Jennifer know she was doing a good job while also helping her to grow. And that's ultimately what winning well is all about. It's encouraging people, and we're going to stay focused on results, but we're going to encourage people and provide that atmosphere of nurture and growth. So we're going to build healthy relationships. We're going to invest in strengths. We're going to remember people are different, and we're going to coach people in their strengths and help them to grow. When we encourage, you want to be specific about your encouragement. And there's two things to be specific on. What did they do, and why did it matter? So if I say, for instance, with Jennifer, Jennifer, thank you for that extra work you put in with that large client. The extra hours you spent on Tuesday made a difference, and they renewed their account. So then I said, what did she do? She did extra hours on Tuesday. What was the result? The client renewed their account. We want to be specific about those things. Make it meaningful. Thank yous are always meaningful, but what's meaningful to your individual people? Ask them. When they join your team, ask them, how do you like to receive recognition for a job well done? Some people will tell you, oh, private thank you. Just tell me thank you in private. That's all I need. Other people like public recognition. Some people like a plaque. Some people might like, I had a gentleman who he loved his family, and I could, for something important, I could give him a half hour extra. He could leave work half an hour extra. I would cover his work for him so he could go be with his family. Make it meaningful. And then finally, make it relevant to the work. What is it you're trying to achieve? Make sure that the things that you're encouraging are relevant to what success looks like and the results you're trying to accomplish. So ultimately, that's what winning well is all about. Winning well is about building great results in an environment of healthy professional relationships. And as I close, I want to share this picture. This is my daughter, Avery, who I mentioned earlier, and that's me. We backpacked up the third highest volcano in Guatemala. She lives in the country of Guatemala now. And we climbed this volcano, we camped at the top, and overnight we climbed to the summit in the middle of the dark. And we were very discouraged. It was very challenging. And you might be challenged right now because you've received so many different things that you can use. Where do I start? Where do I begin? Well, at one point, one of the Guatemalan guides came along, and we were struggling, and he just said 3 words. The words were poco a poco. In Spanish, this translates little by little, one step at a time. And my encouragement, my invitation for you today, as you're thinking about your team and your business and your organization, is you don't have to do everything. Pick one thing. What is the very next step you can take? Maybe it's, I'm going to be more clear about results with my team. Maybe it's, I need to have a coaching conversation. Maybe it's, I need to identify the strengths in my people. Maybe I need to encourage. Pick one thing. Poco a poco, step by step, little by little. And I promise you, you will get to the summit. This is a view from the top of the volcano we're on at sunrise, looking down at other volcanoes, and in the middle right, you can see there's a volcano down below us that's erupting above the clouds. It was beautiful, and I promise that as you focus on results and build those relationships, you're going to cultivate an environment, and you're going to have those motivated, productive people achieving more than you can by yourself. Mr. Joffrey, let's open it to questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. David, for a very, very interesting presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answers, so if you have any questions, you could put it in the question box, or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console, so if you click on it, you can talk directly with Mr. Dye. So let me go to the first question. We have, What if my boss doesn't care about winning well? What can I do to be a good leader in a negative environment?
Well, thank you for that question. That's a question that I'm asked frequently, and it's very common where you might have an executive who they have a way of doing things. It's worked for them. Maybe it hasn't worked as well as it could, and they may be stressed out. And I have worked in my work days before I started my own company. I had managers like this. What I encourage you to do is to create what we call an envelope of excellence. You are responsible for how you lead. So your supervisor, your boss, the executives, they're going to be who they are. You cannot change that. You cannot control that. What you can take responsibility for is how you interact and work with your people. So if you have a team of 5 people, how do you treat them? Have you clarified results? Are you connecting every what to a meaningful, compelling why? Do you recognize the strengths on those on the team of those people? Are you encouraging your people frequently, and are you having those training and coaching conversations when you need to? Your boss might not do those things. You still can do those things. Now you know, and with that knowing, you can take action. What's the next question?
Okay, thank you very much. There's another one. What about the concerns of publicly appreciating employee and then managing jealousy from other staff members, or perhaps a concern that they may feel demotivated?
Excellent observation. That is a risk, and it's one of the reasons that I say, if I go back to the slide about when you encourage somebody, it needs to be specific, meaningful, and relevant. Relevant is very, very important there. If you're going to publicly acknowledge someone, be absolutely sure that it's something that a team of people weren't responsible for. So in other words, if 5 people achieved something and you need them working together as a team, do not recognize one person on that team. Recognize the whole team. That's what you want to do there. So always default to the largest group that were responsible for that outcome, and that's going to help encourage what you actually want. Now, if you have a very competitive sales team, for instance, and you want individuals competing as individuals, that's a setting in which maybe public recognition to spark a little bit of positive competition might be healthy. In general, though, the person who asked that question, I absolutely agree with you. You want to be careful about that. And if it's appropriate to do individual recognition and you want to help avoid some of the jealousy, one of the ways that I do that is to say, okay, this is what this person did, and we want to recognize that, thank them publicly. Here is how this matters for us. So here is how you, as somebody in the audience, are better off because of what that person did and the contribution they made. So that can spark some gratitude in the person who's in the audience as well. So great observation. A couple of ways to avoid that. One, don't call out individuals when you need to be acknowledging the team. And second, make sure when you do that, that you're acknowledging how that person's contribution helps everybody and avoid some of those jealousies.
Right. Thank you very much. We have another one from Mr. Paul Greasley. The question is, thank you for your presentation. Encouragement is powerful, positive motivator. How do you discourage negative behaviors and actions?
Fantastic. And that goes along with the subject of accountability. Now, we had limited time in today's program, but accountability is very important. And so I'm going to give you a very quick process, and we get into this more extensively in the book, but a very quick process to address negative behaviors or behaviors that are unhealthy or unproductive. And let's take, for instance, a very frequent one that can irritate managers is, let's say you have a meeting that's an hour long, and let's say it starts at 9 o'clock, and it only lasts for an hour, and it's important that everybody is there starting at 9 o'clock. And you have somebody who arrives at that meeting at 9:15. So they showed up late. Immediately after the meeting, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to talk to that person individually, and the 3 things I'm going to do is I'm going to observe. I'm going to make note. Let's say this gentleman's name is John. I'll say, John, I noticed that you arrived at 9:15. Then I'm going to ask what happened. We call it observe and inquire, or observe and then ask. And so for the question that was asked, how do I discourage negative behaviors? One of the most powerful tools that you can possibly use is simply to make an observation about the behavior to the person. Many of the negative things that we do, we don't always realize that we're doing them. We don't realize that we're late. We don't realize it's really an important issue. People often wait to find out if something is important to you. So if you've let somebody be late 5 times and you've never addressed it, you have effectively told them it's okay. If they turn in their work late, you don't want to wait. If it's not there by the time you asked for it, you ask right away. You say, I noticed that your report is not in. What's happening? What's going on? And I'm asking in a neutral tone of voice so I can actually find out, and I don't want to put them on the defensive, but I do want to ask and find out. Maybe they are struggling. Maybe they needed help. Maybe there was a problem, and I can help them solve that, or I can coach them. So that's the very first piece of having those accountability conversations. Observe the behavior, ask what's happening, what's going on, and then from there, you're going to confirm the desired behavior. So if I said, okay, I noticed you arrived at 9:15 this morning for our 9 o'clock meeting. What's going on? He says, okay, I overslept. I was late. I apologize. I say, great. Can you remind me when the meeting starts? He says, yes, it's at 9 o'clock. Fantastic. I'm glad that you'll be able to be there. Can you commit to me that you'll be here at 9 from now on? Yes, David, I will. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your work. Thank you for your contribution to the team. I'll see you next week. That's the starting point. Now, we go much further in depth, but that's the starting point for dealing with some of those negative behaviors, for some of the things that don't work. The last thing I'll say on that is I appreciate the question, because a focus on results, and something that winning well managers do is they practice very, very clear accountability. When you don't hold people accountable, you tell your top performers that you don't actually care about their work. And so accountability is very, very important, and I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another one from Brother Ahmed Samir. The question is, explaining why you're asking someone to do something works brilliantly with enthusiastic and sharp team members. But about those who frustrate you and don't get it, the not caring attitude frustrates me. Should I fire them?
That is a fantastic question. The answer is maybe, but not quite yet. Here's what I would do in between. With somebody like that, I will start by taking them privately and asking them a series of 4 questions. First, I will ask, what are you most proud of on this team? What are you most proud that our organization, our team has achieved? I will then ask, what do you think we're capable of? What would it look like if we were to very much succeed at our top level? I'll ask them, what do they think they're capable of? What could their success look like? And then I'll ask them, what do they most care about? Both in the job and outside of the job. What is most meaningful and important to them? When I ask these questions, I am exploring the individual and what their values and what their commitment and what their fit is going to be on the team. If there's nothing that they're proud of on the team and they don't care about the work and it has no relationship to them, and then I discover that they really are not motivated even in their own life, and they're really struggling, I'm going to wish them well, but that's probably not a great match for the team. It's probably not an employee who's going to be very helpful. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a frontline retail job or something that requires a PhD level of education. If I ask those questions and I get nothing in response, probably this person has some bigger that they need to focus on in life and finding themselves, and this may not be the right place for them. And I'll have that conversation honestly. So, if this is what success looks like, and this is why it's important, And in your role, success does look like being able to do these things. And if that's not something you feel that you can achieve or that you can accomplish, then this probably isn't the best role for you. Now, keeping strengths in mind, I may not fire them. There may be a different set of strengths that they have that they can be positioned differently in the company. But if not, then yes, then it's probably a good idea to let them go. We have a chapter in Winning Well called, how to terminate people without losing your soul. Sometimes firing a person or separating them from your organization is one of the most compassionate, healthy things that you can do. When you let somebody continue to perform poorly, you're sheltering them from real life, and you're actually keeping them weak and you're preventing them from learning how to succeed in life. So we go through and run you through all the tips, but that's the starting place to answer that question. Is I'm going to have a conversation with them, and I'm going to find out if there is anything they do care about. Can I make this work relevant to what they do care about? If there isn't, and they don't care about anything, they're probably not a good match.
Thank you very much. We have one last question. If you are more of a pleaser, how do you recommend improving your focus on results?
Oh, excellent question. Well, for the person who asked that, congratulations on the awareness to know that you're coming from that direction. We have an assessment in the book that you can take that will help you as well to identify, are you more user, pleaser, gamer? If you're a pleaser, one of the recommendations that I would have for you is first, acknowledge your strength. You care about people, and that's a good thing. And you want to keep caring about people. Second is to know that as you care about people, you're going to help people when you help them perform and achieve results. And then the third thing is to simply ask one question. What is the most important result our team exists to achieve? Why does our team exist? To really take some time to answer that question. Okay, our team exists to make sure that the accounting is done properly for the company so we remain profitable as a whole. Okay, great. Or our team exists to make sure our patients receive top quality health care. Very good. Whatever the result is, you want to start with that question. What does success look like for you and for your team? Then you're going to have a conversation with your team around that and say, I haven't always kept this in front of us, and I'll take responsibility for that. Starting today, I want us to be very clear about what success looks like, and then we're going to explore what are the key behaviors that help us get there, and how do we hold ourselves accountable for those behaviors. We have a lot more of the tools of how to do that, but those are the questions I'm going to start to move from pleaser to winning well.
All right, thank you very much. And one last question, which I would like to ask you personally, David. What about the carrot and stick? Is it a thing of past, or is it very much there today now?
Oh, the carrot and stick. So the idea of carrot and stick, carrots are incentives and stick is punishment, right?
Yeah.
What we know is that those do work at least a little bit, okay? Here's the way I say this. If a robber tells you, give me all your money, and he has a gun, and he's threatening to steal from you, you give him your wallet, and he gets the money that you have on you. He used fear and intimidation, power and control, and he got a little bit of money. He had whatever he had on you. But if you have money in the bank, if you have assets to give, you're only going to give those to something you believe in, something your heart is connected to. So can you get results by using the carrot and using incentives? Yes, a little bit. But here's how I say it. Money gets people in the door, and money might keep them from leaving. Punishment might make people perform, but it only makes them perform the very least amount in order to avoid the punishment. So the carrot and stick work, but they don't get the results that you need if you want to win. I've never met a manager, as I said, who said, you know what, I just want the least amount of effort from my team. Carrot and stick, they work, but they only get you the least amount of effort from your team. If you want more than that, if you want their heart and their soul to be connected to their work, that's when you use the tools that we've been talking about today.
Brilliant. Very well answered. Thank you very much, and thank you. So really want to thank you, David, on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, for your time and for this valuable information that you have delivered today. So thank you very much once again.
Oh, you're very welcome, and it's been my pleasure, Mr. Schaff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. This really brings us towards the end of the webinar, so please be informed that we are recording this webinar, which will be uploaded on webinar.mile.org. So please stay tuned to our community to access the recorded version and to learn about our upcoming webinars as well. With that note, I would like to end this webinar. You all will